Hi, I'm Jamie Poisson. So on Thursday afternoon, sitting around the office, everyone has one eye on a script, the other on Twitter or X, whatever. And these videos, they start popping up. A hamster riding a half duck, half dragon as the sun sets. Two golden retrievers sitting on a blanket on a mountain, podcasting. A train zooming through a futuristic city. They were impressive, weird, but impressive. And the product of OpenAI's new tool, a text-to-video product called Sora. Watching these videos, we were all like, wow. But then, as more and more of them kept getting posted, oh wow, it kind of turned to, oh no. There was a realistic food influencer making gnocchi, a grandmother blowing out her birthday cake candles. And while they weren't 100% accurate, compared to where the tech was a year ago, they are definitely getting closer to mirroring reality. Today, I'm speaking with Professor Gary Marcus. He's a cognitive scientist, an AI researcher, and entrepreneur, and author of the forthcoming book, Taming Silicon Valley. And we're going to talk about Sora, what we know and don't know about how it works, and its potential implications for creative industries, deepfakes, and even democracy as a whole. Gary, thank you so much for coming onto Front Burner.
It's great to be back.
So what is Sora, and what do we know about how it works?
Sora is something where you type in a piece of text, a description of something, and it generates a short video for you. So you can say, make me a point of view video of some ants walking in an ant colony. And we'll actually do that. It may not work perfectly, but it'll give you something that looks at least a little bit like what you're talking about. Often something that looks a lot like what you're talking about, and often something that if you look really carefully isn't quite right.
Last week, the OpenAI CEO, Sam Altman, he got people to tweet at him with like prompts, those text prompts that you're talking about. And the videos that came out right away, I mean, there were some that were pretty amazing, like two golden retrievers podcasting on the top of a mountain, or one with dolphins and other animals riding bicycles on top of the ocean. And they were fantastical scenarios, but these ones, they did look incredibly realistic. I'm looking at one right now. It's a woman in a leather jacket walking down a Tokyo street filled with warm, sort of glowing neon signs. And it is very impressive, I have to say. It looks almost completely real.
Looks almost completely real. Most of them have problems. So, for example, the woman walking on the street, there are people in the background, if that's the one I remember, where it looks like they're almost like zombies kind of floating around. The woman actually takes two left steps at about 28 seconds in,
Huh.
which is not biologically possible. So, when you start to look carefully at them, and of course, that's this generation, and we can ask what will happen in future generations. But if you start to look carefully at these videos, there are often a lot of violations of physical laws. The one that's maybe most disconcerting to me is that objects pop in and out of existence, which 6-month-old babies realize can't actually happen. So there's
Mm.
one, for example, of wolf pups. And if you look at it carefully, the number of wolf pups changes from one frame to the next. There's another one where I don't know if they're archaeologists, what they're supposed to be, but they dig a chair out of the ground. The chair starts to levitate at some point, and one of the people walks behind another. And when the camera kind of shifts around, that the first person, I think is in a tan shirt, has just disappeared altogether. So there are violations of physical laws. Another video showed, I mentioned already, the ant walking through a
Yeah.
colony. And if you look carefully at it, the ant only has 4 legs. And most normal ant, well, all normal ants have 6 legs. It'd be very weird to see an ant with 4 legs. And so somebody posted, wow, I can't believe they even got the dynamics of the legs right. But they didn't get the dynamics of the legs right. It wasn't even the right number of legs. And if you watch that whole video, there's like this weird two-headed ant that pops up and so forth. So there are a lot of, you might call them glitches. And from the perspective of cognitive science, this matters because you want to know, does this thing really understand the world? And I think the answer is no. I think something else is going on here. But I would say they look fantastic. They look photorealistic. detailed, sharp graphics. So there's something absolutely stunning about them, but there's also something, if you look carefully, for many of them, maybe not all, but quite a lot of them, there are little glitches that don't quite meet reality.
But having said all that, and that was fascinating listening to you go through all those examples. I could like see the glitches in the woman in Tokyo video in real time as you were describing it. But having said all that, the speed at which this technology can improve is pretty breathtaking, right? Like if we look at another example, the OpenAI tool ChatGPT, when it was first released in the fall of 2022, and then now it's gotten so much better. And what could that tell us about what Sora might be able to do in even a few months from now?
Well, it has and it hasn't. The prominent idea in the field for the last few years has been sometimes paraphrased as scale is all you need. The idea is if we just make them bigger and bigger, they'll solve all the problems. And I've been arguing against that, saying that although they get better and better in many dimensions, there's still certain basic problems that they have. So here's what I think we will see for Sora itself in 2 years, because they will keep trying to make it, although there's not so much headroom given how much data and money I think they already put into it, but there's surely some headroom. It will continue to improve for a while. But I think that these physical errors are going to continue. Another one was a glass that turns on its side and starts floating in air and liquid falls through the glass. The lack of understanding of everyday physical world we have seen in GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4. We've seen it in Sora. I think we will still continue to see it. We might see fewer errors,
Hmm.
as there's more data, they might reduce. But I think inherently this approach is not about representing things in the world, saying, I see an X here, a Y there. It's really about pixels and predicting patterns of pixels over time. And that's why we're getting some of these quirks. And I would actually be surprised if the quirks are entirely eliminated. I had a conversation today on Twitter with somebody about this, and they said, well, I think these errors will reduce by 80% in 2 years. And my reply was, well, if it reduces by 80%, but you're getting something like 1 per 5 seconds of video, that's still actually a lot. That's still enough that for a high production value film, we wouldn't be enough. It might be enough for an advertisement. It might be enough for misinformation campaign where people aren't going to look that
Right.
close.
I mean, certainly I didn't see some of what you pointed out in
That's
those
right.
examples, right? Like I didn't see, those glitches in the
A
woman.
lot of people didn't see the four legs on the ant.
Yeah. Yeah. I also didn't see the four legs on the ant.
Most people didn't.
Yeah. Let's say that is correct, right? And that these models, you hear people say the technology is never going to get worse than it is right now. But let's say it gets only a little bit better and then it kind of plateaus.
It could get more dangerous, but it won't get technically worse.
So,
So
so
I
maybe
mean,
then let's talk about that. Let's talk about how it could be used in the real world, I guess either for good or for evil. Could we start with good?
sure. I mean, I guess the positive use case for Sora is it enables a lot of people to be creative in ways that they couldn't before. So I couldn't, make a 30-second video or wouldn't have the patience for it. And now, once it becomes available to the public and assuming it's, reasonable price, lots of people will be able to make short videos and that will be fun. It's going to be empowering in something like the way that Photoshop is. Not exactly, because you have more control over Photoshop, but you can do things faster in this system. So it's kind of trade off. But so it will be of some use to creative people. A great use case might be if you want to make a movie, you used to often draw storyboards, one scene at a time. And now, even if you don't have drawing skills, you could kind of do that with Sora. They wouldn't be perfect. You would still need to remake them. So,
Hmm.
there are limits, but I think as a prototyping tool, it's already looks like it's pretty good. I haven't actually used it. They haven't released it to the general public nor to the scientific community in any broad way. But if it's as good as it looks in the demos, then it's a very cool prototyping tool, and undeniably fun.
Yeah, I was thinking, if if I had written like a short story, right? I could probably use this tool to try and create a short video about that story or something like that, right? Even though you say that it has these limitations.
If you wanted a little 90-second, or let's say 30-second video that was kind of like an advertisement for your story, I think you could easily do that. I think if you wanted a 10-minute video, it would actually turn out to be really frustrating. So like it would probably make the protagonist look different in each scene. The lighting
Mm,
would vary and so forth. And I suspect, although this is really just speculation from the 12 or so videos that I've seen, I suspect that it would get very frustrating if you wanted to do anything longer than a single clip. So, in many ways, this system is similar to Dolly or Dolly
yeah.
3, Midjourney, and those are really
Which was
good.
images, right? Like, yeah, still
Exactly,
images.
they make still images, but people who've played around with them a lot often get frustrated. So, for amateurs, again, it's a fantastic thing. But if you want something precise, will have, for example, text that isn't really right, and there's no way to fix that text, or you want it from a slightly different angle, it can be hard to get it to do exactly what you want. So, in the near term, anyway, if you write a short story and you really want to turn that into a movie, I think you're going to be frustrated.
But, if I'm one of these people in these creative industries, in the long term, what might the implications be here? Like, should I be really concerned, in your opinion?
It's a double-edged sword. So one thing we haven't talked about is copyright. And for working artists, this is a real problem. If your living is making concept art to help a movie designer, director figure out what they want, you're in trouble because this stuff can do a bunch of that. If your job is to do set design throughout a film, it's not really going to do that. But so some, Hollywood artists are already threatened. Some film studios should be really upset. You probably know about the New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI, which showed that OpenAI could essentially plagiarize some of their work and was obviously training
Right.
on their data.
Yeah, the language sorry, just for our listeners, like, the language model behind the ChatGPT had used, an enormous amount of New York Times articles to help train it, so that's why they're suing.
That, that's right. And in the lawsuit, they have 100 examples where things are almost word for word identical over a space of paragraphs between what Chat GPT would do with a prompt that was the first few words of a story, and then it would basically regurgitate the story. So Reed Southan, who's a artist who's worked with places like Marvell, and I did some experiments in December, which we published in January in the IEEE Spectrum, showing that the visual models do the same thing. So for example, you can say something like, draw me a picture of an Italian plumber, and you're probably going to get Nintendo's Mario character back. Well,
Mm,
Nintendo's not going to like that. So on the one hand, the film studios, I would suspect, are going to be quite upset about this. On the other hand, they're
yeah.
like, can I save money if I use this?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
So I think
Yeah.
some of the film studios are hanging back trying to decide what to do. I think a lot of people are watching that New York Times lawsuit. If it actually goes to trial, it could set a huge precedent either way. It could almost
Yeah.
shut down the whole AI industry, or, well, at least this part of it, the generative AI industry,
Yeah.
or it could give them license to use things. Most likely, it'll be a settlement. So I've been joking that 2023 was the year of generative AI, and 2024 is the year of generative AI litigation. There's going to be
Hmm.
so many lawsuits filed.
So I think this is a great spot for us to talk about misinformation, because it seems like the big one here, and it's particularly concerning to me as a journalist. It's the potential implications for deepfakes, for misinformations, for videos that look real with real famous people, for example, doing and saying things that they never did. And talk to me a bit about your concerns there, what it could mean for elections, for democracy, for our understanding of what's even real.
All of those things. I'm frankly terrified. So I actually posted about the four-legged ant as an example of this. So there are the obvious cases with elections, right? We've already seen this. There was at least one election that may have turned on a deep fake.
This is Michael Šimečka. He is the leader of the main opposition party here in Slovakia, and on the eve of this country's elections last year, he was the target of a deepfake. Just 2 days before voting began in that high-stakes election, this audio tape began circulating online. It purported to be a recording of a conversation in which Šimečka talks about stealing the election. His party, Progressive Slovakia, went on to lose the election by a few points. Do you think this...
There's like 70 elections around the globe this year. The technology is improving. People are using it more and more. So there's definitely a serious chance of having impact on elections. You can expect that, in October 24, we'll see, for example, deepfake footage of, one of the US presidential candidates falling down the steps in order to make them look infirm. That kind of stuff seems inevitable. And then there's another problem, which I would call the pollution of the information ecosphere, which is scammers like to make fake stuff and monetize it. And we've already seen this in different ways. So like last year, people had fake websites saying that Maya Bialik, if I've got her name right, was selling CBD gummies. Well, she wasn't, but they sold ads off of it. They didn't care that it wasn't true. Now, the New York Times had an article yesterday about fake books. And some of my friends have been hit by this, where they will write a book and then somebody writes a book with a slightly different author name, slightly different title. It takes them like 5 minutes with ChatGPT. They put it on Amazon and then the real authors get hurt. And, there are cases where like people are putting out books about, how to eat mushrooms, and they're probably filled with mistakes because we know that these systems are not accurate. And so, there's going to start to be increasing risk that people are going to get bad information of that sort. With the four-legged ant, somebody said to me, well, what's the big deal about, having a video with a four-legged ant? Well, the problem is that we are soon not going to trust any videos because there's going to be so many of these fake videos put out in order to try to make money on YouTube and so forth. And we're going to reach a point where we just have no idea what to believe or not.
And also, like, politicians could say that something was fake when it wasn't actually fake. Like, maybe they actually said that thing and got caught saying it on camera or, off.
That's going to be a very common thing, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, the evidential value of video is going to drop to zero. There are some efforts, like Adobe is leading a very nice effort to try to watermark videos. So if you have the right camera, it will actually give some kind of authentication signal. So there are some ways to deal with this, but I don't think they're enough. I think they're like, fingers and dikes, and there's just going to be enormous amount of this stuff. And the only solutions I see that work even a little bit are to have governments demand that any AI generated content is labeled as that. And maybe we will get laws passed that do that. I think the EU AI Act is somewhat in that direction.
It is adopted. Congratulations.
The European Union's Parliament passing a draft law restricting AI, limiting the use of facial recognition software, and requiring AI companies to disclose more about the data behind their programs.
Even that's not going to be enough because a lot of cheaters are going to, try to evade whatever protections we have. So it's going to be like gun laws, where if you actually catch somebody, you can do something about it, but it doesn't mean that it's literally impossible for somebody to secure a gun, somebody that shouldn't have one. We are going to be in a kind of cat and mouse chase forever on this stuff.
This idea that, governments might be able to step in and regulate here and label everything generated by AI. Even if they took a real run at that, do you even have confidence that they can do that? I keep thinking about that moment several years back when Mark Zuckerberg was in front of, lawmakers, and, one of the lawmakers asked him, like, essentially, how does Facebook make its money?
We believe that we need to offer a service that everyone can afford, and we're committed to doing that.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
I see.
And you're like, oh my God, they don't even understand how it works. And so I guess the thing with AI is that it strikes me, though, that the people who made the AI don't even understand how it works.
So first of all, nobody fully understands current AI. We can do kind of empirical science to say, in this kind of circumstance, what does this system do? But nobody understands it in the way that we understand a simple set of equations where we can just plug in the numbers. We have to actually run these models, which is expensive. It takes millions or even $1 billion to train this, and then it takes a lot of money to run it. And you can run experiments on it like it's an alien from another planet. But it's not like we really fully understand exactly how it works. Nobody does. Not at the companies, not in the government, not outside scientists like myself, which is cause for concern, right? We have well under control the engineering behind bridges and airplanes and so forth. We don't have the engineering well under control around AI. Then
Hmm.
there's a sort of milder sense, which is like how many people in the Senate understand the basic notion that you train on a large set of data, that the quality of your results depends on the amount of that data, the quality of the data, even basic stuff like that. And probably,
Yeah.
it's a lot less than 100%, but it's a lot higher than zero.
I don't know. I don't know if that gives me
Gives you great hope. It
if I
should give
find that
you,
reassuring. That,
it's,
um,
you should be only slightly reassured. You should have that, well, I
yeah.
guess it could be worse reaction.
Yeah. Oh, great. Oh, that's always good. Yeah, and I guess also too, this stuff is coming from all over the world, so it's hard. Like, how do you kind of regulate a group of people who are operating out of Moscow too, right? Um,
There are those problems too. So, the
yeah,
US has to get its own house in order, but then what do you do globally? I have been advocating for some kind of global governance, and there are questions about, like, would any country give up its sovereignty in order to be part of some global thing looking out for the dangers of AI? I think the answer is actually
mm,
yes. We've done that, for example, for nuclear weapons. It's hard to negotiate these treaties. They take like decades, not weeks, or a decade, I should say, several years to negotiate treaties like this. But I think every country, I mean, Russia's on its own little axis, so I don't even know what to say about Russia. But China, I've actually talked to a bunch of people from China, including fairly high academics that are in close contact with the government. China, wants the same things that we do, which is they want an orderly universe. They may have a different definition of that than we do, but they want an orderly universe. They want their citizens to be safe and so forth. So, like, China doesn't want its citizens to all be robbed by cyber criminals either, right? I mean,
right. Well, I imagine too that technology out of control could threaten the leadership, the Chinese government, right? Like
every
yeah,
government should actually be worried about what Ian Bremmer calls a technopolar world, which would be a world in which most of the power is in the hands of a few unelected tech companies and not the governments themselves. We're already drifting
yeah.
towards that, right?
Well,
Um,
talking about those tech companies, what about what they're doing, like the companies that are kind of leading the way here? So OpenAI and Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, would say that they're putting up guardrails and that they're doing this really carefully. And and what do you think?
So it's very difficult with current technology to build guardrails that really work. So you have two problems. One is that they can be too restrictive. So people start complaining that the systems are too politically correct or too lazy and so forth, because they won't engage in perfectly reasonable requests. Like I asked the system, what would be the religion of the first Jewish president? And the guardrail intervened and said, well, it's impossible to tell what the religion of the first Jewish president would. Well, that's just absurd, right? So there you have a guardrail that's too restrictive, and sometimes they're too loose. So I testified, in front of the U.S. Senate last May. For my Senate testimony, I made it, or had a friend actually make an illustration in which there was a news story purporting that US senators were involved in a conspiracy with space aliens to keep human beings as a one planet species. And the guardrails, were not enough to stop that whatsoever. So the truth is that current AI does not really understand humans, does not really understand the world. And so the guardrails are hit or miss.
Gary, just to end this conversation, you've been working in AI for decades now. And I know that you have said that this kind of use of AI didn't even occur to you. And I'm just curious to know, what did you imagine might be the uses for this technology? Like, where did you think we would be right now?
In some ways, we're behind. I thought maybe we would have the Star Trek computer by 2024. And then the other side is I thought it would be used for good, like it would solve medicine. Like I thought by now we would have solved Alzheimer's. Come on. Like, many, many neuroscientists have worked on Alzheimer's, many companies and so forth, and we can't seem to get those questions right. You'd think, well, maybe AI could help us with that. But instead, the number one, sexiest application of AI right now is making videos that are kind of like screwing artists whose materials are being used to train them. Like that's not
Hmm.
such a pro-social application. And I didn't go into AI to like make some money by ripping off artists. That's not why I'm in this field. Too much of it right now has been about making a quick buck without, I think, enough concern for the ethical consequences of what these systems are used for.
Gary, thank you so much for this. That was really eye-opening.
Thank you for giving me a chance to say it. And I really appreciate being back. Thanks for having me again.
All right, that is all for today. I'm Jamie Poisson. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.